Okay. So welcome to our phase 4 of Wellness Wednesdays, our last in the series. I'd like to welcome Dee O'Neill and Jeff Hurt to the stage to talk to us a little bit about conversational cocktails. Jeff?
Got it. So fostering conversational cocktail experiences that develop trust and purpose. It's all about deep connections. We'll find more about that. And so I want to know, use that text chat box, where are you right now? And where would you like to be right now? Where are you right now? And where would you like to be? Would you text those in? I'm at my house. I would love to be on the beach right now. Listening to the waves. I apologize. I want to be in, well, not really with the hurricane possibly coming in down in South Texas, but South Padre Island is where I like, because the water's a little bit warmer. It's a lot warmer. What am I saying? So, Julie, I'll let you jump in and share. Or Dee, what would you do right now?
Sure. A couple people, I'm at the office, but they'd like to be on a hike. At the home office, Hawaii on a beach. At home in San Leandro, but I'd like to be at a spa. Home office, but wish I was with my tribe wine tasting. I'm in the Bay Area, but I'd love to be in San Diego.
So, and Dee, was that yours about would love to be in Hawaii?
That was
No,
me.
that was Julie's. Yeah, but I'm with her. Also home office, and yes, would rather be. All those options sound great. Beach, spa, hiking, any of those sound great.
Yeah. Okay, I want to thank you again for your time and your mental engagement. What you put into this presentation is what you're going to get out of it. And as you've seen me do 3 times already, here comes the 4th time. The presenter attendee agreement with you. And this presenter attendee agreement, believing in the law of the click. If this presentation veers in a direction doesn't meet your need, you get a text, you get a phone call, get bored, you have the right to click on out of this. You don't have to be polite about this and tell me what's going on or send us a text, because we're here for you. Dee and I are here for you. You're not here for us. Let's get that straight. We're here for you. And put those mobile devices on vibrate. You know the routine here. You're gonna texting, typing, social share. If you're gonna social share anything from this presentation, please make sure that you social share stuff Dee and I say. We're okay with that. And get permission from anybody else before you share it. You're going to use Twitter, tweet into others as you haven't tweeted to you, and tweet something good before you tweet anything bad. But understanding the neuroscience of our conversations, that's the goal today, and how it all fits into this picture of emotional intelligence and managing stress and pressure. And if this is a safe space to agree, disagree, ponder, and question, and get, as usual, always you get a free pass, and you can use this free pass as frequently and as often as you want. And if this presenter attendee agreement works for you, would you type in a Y for us? If it doesn't, type in an N. If you don't know, type in an M, maybe. So give that just a couple of seconds.
Looks like
lots of Y's.
Lots of Y's. Yeah.
So here's where this information is coming from. These are 3 books that I would recommend. The Conversational Intelligence piece by Judith Glaser. We were having a chat about Judith before y'all got on, and Julie has seen Judith, but in recording, because Judith was supposed to do a keynote session for Julie's conference at CWEA years ago, and she was diagnosed. She had a re-emergence of liver cancer, and it was pretty severe. Judith is no longer with us today. She passed away 2 Thanksgivings ago. But Judith was just amazing. I would highly recommend this book. It will resonate with you loud and clear. Anything you would like to say about the book, Dee? What you read with Judith?
Yeah, I actually got it on Audible, and I just love listening to it, even just this past weekend. I think she pulls together so many resources that I often speak about too, that I'm sure we'll cover today. It's a unique book where it's based in science, but she really brings in a lot of the less sort of standard academic neuroscientists. So I think it's a wonderful, really enjoyable read.
Yep. And Judith called herself an organizational anthropologist, which I just love that term, organizational anthropologist. She was brilliant at it. So about you, my favorite Halloween costume was, can you think back to your childhood or even as an adult, what was your favorite Halloween costume? Would you type those in and share with us, please? And while you're doing that, I thought I would show you, this was not my favorite. My mother sewed most of my clothes. Yeah, that's the way I felt. I'm in 7th grade here, and my mother found, anytime she found out there was a dress up day at school, she would secretly make me a costume. I'd wake up the next morning. She said, I have your costume for today. This was President's Day at junior high. Now, we know what 7th grade's like anyway, unless you put more pressure on Jeff. Please his mom and dress up as George Washington with her clothes that she's made or not. I was the only one dressed up in 7th grade that day. And I went to school like this. I didn't want attention on me, of course, dressed like this. I had, notice, my parents' household, they had colonial American furniture, so it fit well. Julie, what's come in?
We have a leopard, a lion, a witch, an angel in 2nd grade. And mine was, I was a witch, and my mom found somewhere online that if she got big carrots, she could like make them thin and they would curl, and she bobby pinned them in my hair. It was awful. I don't have any photos of it, thank God. And by the time we made it down, this was back in the 70s, so you got to go out trick-or-treating by yourself, so without parents. By the time we made the second house, my girlfriend and I got them all out.
So my mother dressed me up in 2nd grade. I'm not 2nd grade. When I was 2 years old, she had an authentic Japanese kimono, and she dressed me up in that kimono and put makeup and put a black wig on me. And I still have pictures of that. It's on my Facebook page. I tell her, I said, that's what caused me to be who I am today, Mom. So here's a little bit about me. I decided to give you some different things about me. I'm an avid reader. I read a lot. But I process it differently because I'll read a chapter in one book and I'll put it down and I'll write about it, and I'll read a chapter in another book, and I try to connect 2 different books that have nothing in common. And it's just what I've done my whole life. I'm a lifelong learner. I'm a lover of all things related to the brain, and I've embraced curiosity. I'm also a dog lover. We haven't figured that out. G, tell us a little bit about yourself. I put this on your dog lovers.
Yeah. Well, and that's why Jeff and I are kind of soulmates in doing this kind of work, because I am also kind of obsessed with the brain. If you could see my bookcase behind me, just all filled with brain books, and that's what I do in my free time. I love it. In graduate school, once I started taking some courses in neuropsychology and neuroscience, I just haven't looked back. So Boomer and Lonnie are subject of many of my talks, because we're all sort of animals at some brain level, and so I love to sort of bring them in as a great analogy.
And do you tell us how dog brains are different than human brains, just briefly?
Well, I'd love to point out, I think I've mentioned in earlier sessions with BOMA that in my TEDx talk, I mentioned how, especially Boomer and Lonnie, they have tiny little heads, tiny little brains. So the biggest part of their brain, the most active part of their brain, is the amygdala, which we'll talk about today, right? As Jeff calls it, Amy for short, because it's spelled AMY, GDALA, amygdala. That's our limbic, most primitive, it's called animalistic part of our brain. So Boomer and Lonnie have that part of the brain. What they don't have is a large prefrontal cortex. So that executive, I call it kind of the boss of the brain. So they aren't solving a lot of problems or making a lot of great decisions. They're kind of living in the moment, which we can learn from a little bit, but ultimately our brains are wired pretty differently, from an executive leader to everyone on this call to how our dogs are functioning day by day.
Okay, and so that's why dogs are so loyal. They're emotionally connected with us. So here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to discuss the chemistry of conversational cocktails and how to create experiences that lead to deep connections. We're going to identify and practice the 3 types of conversations and the alchemy each has on our brain. And elaborate on why level 3, big blue, sky high altitude dreaming conversations can foster community connections and ignite the executive functions of your brain. So there's my 3 LOs. That's a lot of words. Which one of these 3 interests you the most? And if you can tell us why it interests you. By the way, if there's some words here that you're unfamiliar with and you don't know what's going on here, and you're reading it, and you're like, what is that? Your brain's telling you it's interested. As you think about that, I'm sitting in my home office and my dogs are right here by me. My home office is in the closet under the stairs. And there are actually 3 other dogs in my household as well. My roommates have those.
So right now, Jeff, it looks like 2s, 3 2s, a 1.
Okay.
have to tell you, I saw number 3 and I'm like, I don't know if I have enough brain power to think big, blue, sky high altitude dreaming. These
Well, I'll let you take that up with Dean a little bit.
ones,
Okay, so why would this presentation be important to you? What's in it for you? What's that magic carrot? 9 out of 10 conversations miss the mark. This is from research that Judith Glaser did, and she also did it with Harvard. 9 out of 10 conversations miss the mark. Ouch. And we don't connect fully with people and connect fully with their brains. So it's one of the things that she talks about a lot is we have to make the invisible visible. We have to, boy, this reminds me of Kari Anderson, Julie, what we were just talking about. Make the invisible visible. Why conversational intelligence? Well, what about it? Well, I love this quote. I know that you believe you understand what you think I said, but I'm not sure you realize that what you think, I can't read all this because something's in the way, is not what I meant. Read that yourselves. Boy, doesn't that feel like government today? Or the conversation maybe this morning with your spouse or your kids, particularly if you have teenagers. So, you know, it's interesting because 9 out of 10 conversations miss the mark. Seeing through a new lens, we have to figure out how to have these conversations that have impact and see through different lenses. And what's really interesting is what we've learned with neuroscience and metacognition, you can take yourself out of your brain and analyze what you're doing, think about what you're doing, and use a new lens. And if you get good at this, you can look at it through the lens of other people and how critical that is through their lens. And so it's all about, as Judith would say, moving from I to we. And the more we can move to we-centric conversations, the better off we are. The I-centric conversations come across as very selfish and egomania. So conversation intelligence, what is it? Well, it is the hardwired and learnable ability to connect, navigate, and grow with others, a necessity in building a healthier and more resilient organizations in the face of change, particularly now. Ability to connect, navigate, and grow with others. Conversation intelligence begins with elevating the level of trust that you create with your clients, your customers, and ends with the quality of the interactions and conversations that you have. So again, it's about interaction dynamics. And when you learn the science of the words that we use and how they impact and what chemicals are being released in the brain, you're kind of like, oh. So getting to the next level of greatness. Judith says it depends on the quality of the culture of your organization, which depends on the quality of your relationships, which depends on the quality of your conversations. I know this past week I've said several times to some friends that, you know, all we have is our word. And for me, my word is everything. When I let people down with my word, it's difficult, but because then it goes back to this. I impact the relationship, I impact the culture. So moving from conversations to relationships to culture, everything happens through conversations. So why conversational intelligence? Back to this interaction dynamics, because emotional quotient is the next level is conversational quotient, conversational intelligence. There's also now collaborative intelligence, neuroscience of collaboration. So I would like for you to think about some of the typical conversations you have on a daily basis. Just write in 1 or 2 typical conversations that you have on a daily basis. You can be brief with this, not have to be detailed. What type of conversations do you have on a regular basis, day to day? DY, they're writing. What type of conversations do you have on a day-to-day basis?
It's so interesting because I think when I think immediately is a lot of habitual ones, just sort of those status quo ones, everything from how are you today to good morning, or just all the things that we say without really thinking about them. Or to some, you know, if it's with a client or for a work meeting, I feel like it's a little bit deeper level or more collaborative. But I think there's probably a lot other in the middle of those two that I'm not even conscious of at the moment.
Well, I know my conversations start in my head with me. the conversations I'm having in my own brain. I
Mhm.
think that's another one we need to think about as well. And then the conversations I have with those closest to me. Of course, the conversations online. Julie?
Yeah, we just have a couple feedback. For me, it's always what's for dinner for my 15-year-old. We usually start that around 11 a.m. How are you doing? And then I feel like I'm always scheduling and planning for the future. And I use good to see you a lot.
That's an interesting, good to see you. Interesting. I like that though.
Mhm.
Let's start with that, then hate to see you or bad to see you today. So, conversation. So, the three levels of conversation. Level one is a transactional type of conversation. So, there's three levels. It's a transactional, and it's delivery and exchange of information and data. It's informational, basically. It's transactional, it's informational. It's one way, and it's the majority of the conversations that we have. And interesting, if 9 out of 10 conversations miss the mark and we're delivering information and exchanging information, how many of those don't connect right? Level one, informational, transactional. Informational, transactional. Level one, the challenges is we talk past each other and it's overused. Still, normally you're doing all the talking while they're listening. And that becomes the challenge with it. And when we don't think people are getting it, we use the tell, sell, and yell method. We think that raising our voice is going to have more power and more control over somebody. I don't know about you guys, but for me, when somebody's raising their voice at me, I'm going, well, what's wrong with them? What's going on? What happened? I'm forgetting everything they're saying because I'm listening to the tone of their voice. And people that I've been in close relationships with, I'm always like, what's with deal with the tone today? I hear tone first before I hear words. Level one confirms what you already know. So that slide's not supposed to be there. Sorry about that. Level two conversations are positional. So we're moving from transactional, informational to positional. This is where we're trying to use our power and influence of our beliefs through conversations. Trying to influence somebody else. We're taking a position or a stand. Debate. That's positional. Level two, positional. So here's the challenge. We try to persuade others. We defend what we believe, and we rarely listen to what the other person is saying to seek common ground or to see through their perspective, because it's all about defending where we are. We're addicted to being right. The brain is addicted to being right. We bang our heads with others. It's overused with stating our positions and does not move to level three. Level two conversations normally cause a winner and a loser. They rarely influence change. So level three are transformational conversations. And through the research, Judith found that these are collaborative. When you actually fully collaborate with somebody else, willingly and authentically, and there's co-creation to a shared future. You're working on this together, and you can clearly say it's co-creation. This is a strategic conversation with impact. The more we can be collaborative with others and co-create where we're going to, the better off we are. So level three, transformational. Co-create together where real learning and change occurs. This is where we want to go with our conversations. Now, if we were doing this face-to-face, I would stop and do an activity with you right now, and I would ask you to find somebody in the room, go have a conversation with them, and share something deeply with them that you've never told most people. And that always makes people feel awkward. But it's interesting because when we do this, it actually helps us to bond. Level three conversations, discover what you don't know. And we're seeking understanding and partnership. Well, that's really different than trying to influence and persuade. I love discovering what you don't know. Level three transformational is where real attitude, behavior, and skill change occurs. So the research shows, there's research shows that if you will ask questions of people, truly get to the question part, and even the questions that there aren't real good answers to yet, and if you dream with another person and you think future focused, you bond with them and you never forget it. And when you bond with them like this, it releases oxytocin, the love drug. It releases the bonding hormone where we want to be hugged by people. And it creates this deep relationship that doesn't happen in positional. So here
Hey,
is,
Jeff,
yes,
it's Julie. So one of the things that we switched with we went to an ASAE exceptional boards workshop last year, whenever we could all meet together. And one of the things they talked about was having a generative discussion at the beginning of the board meeting and answer a question or ask a question that there's no answer to. And so we've started doing that at all of our official board meetings, and it's really interesting. It's really, I think and Karen is on the board, and so is Sam and Lee. But when you just showed that slide, I thought that was a really interesting perspective to add back into, keep reminding ourselves that we don't have to have all the answers. And it's really built a lot of trust and collaboration with our board.
and thinking of the questions that we don't know the answers to and coming up with those to have discussions about really helps us mold and shape and think on a deeper level. I don't know if you can hear one of my dogs running up and down the stairs above me. But, it's just interesting because I've learned that the more I can ask questions of somebody, the more I connect with them. And the more interest they show. And having those conversations over those tough questions that we don't know the answers to yet really sheds a lot of light on where people are. If you look at this, so low trust comes when we're the skeptic or the resistor. Conditional trust was we wait and see, experimenter, and high trust when we co-create and collaborate together. Really, I think that's brilliant that you have those conversations. And, I've always said most committee meetings and board meetings are informational. We're telling information where we are with the status of a program instead of, well, where do we want to be? What's next? What could we be doing? And really focusing on where we can have the impact and the collaborative impact of everybody's brains. Level 1, level 2, level 3. Remember, 9 out of 10 don't connect. Now, here's what's interesting. Level 1, guess what? Are in the limbic system. Level 3 are in the executive functions of your brain. How ironic that this lays so nicely over the emotional intelligence piece, over pressure piece, that has everything to do with Amy, the amygdala, and everything to do with moving to the executive functions of your brain. And it also has to do with awe. Dee, anything you want to add here as our scientist du jour?
I mean, I think the only thing that might be to tie back is that it is that either or. So both can't be fully online or active at the same time. And I think that this concept of trust is so helpful to help flip that switch a little bit when we're in stressful situations or high tension, pressure, high stakes conversations. It's hard to not feel emotional or feel really sort of invested in a way that feels kind of personal. But if we're able to kind of quiet that down with lots of the tools we've already talked about, to really know that the end game is this idea that we'll be more creative, we'll have more collaboration, and truly just better conversations and better outcomes might be extra inspiring.
Yeah. So the neuroscience of conversations, here's where it gets really interesting. So we've already seen the pictures of the way the amygdala is, and it's the interaction dynamics, distrust and trust. Now watch this. Distrust or trust happens in the amygdala, trust happens in the executive function. It's one or the other. And of course, positional, you're defending and trying to be right. And so debate in and of itself doesn't move people forward too much. Well, think about it. How often does debate change your mind? And we get into this actually releasing the wrong chemicals in our brain with debate. So we want to move to the executive functions of the brain where we can connect at a deeper level with people and actually do the collaboration and co-creation. So the drugs here that get released in your brain are cortisol and oxytocin. Cortisol on the amygdala side, oxytocin on the executive function side. And we want to downregulate some of the words that we use because it automatically causes some people to release cortisol or get into a level 1 or feel defensive versus a level 2 versus level 3. So fight, flight, freeze, appease is how Judith describes the amygdala. And you can see trust and how the word said, look at this. Anytime you use the word exclude, judge, limit, withhold, know, dictate, and criticize, we want to down regulate those words and the impact of those words on people. We want to upregulate inclusion, appreciation, expansion, sharing, discovering, developing, celebrating, because we do more criticizing than celebrating. And we dictate more than we develop together or evolve together. And so the left-hand side is really the emotional part of the brain, and just lights that fire automatically and releases those chemicals. And there's
Jeff, can I add something to there real quick, Jeff?
Absolutely.
It actually takes me back to my little puppies, Boomer and Lonnie. And for those of you that have dogs, or I think probably cats or pets in general, I'm so fascinated just by seeing how their little brains are so affected by, as you mentioned, tone earlier, or the words that I use, or just the way that I show up sort of energetically, essentially, and how it says on this left side that these are depleting, words or conversations, or even just ways that we're communicating. I'll sometimes just test it a little bit if I'm walking the dogs and I start saying, no, don't go there, and kind of all these negative words, and how they're looking at me, kind of wondering what's the tension all about, and they're feeling scolded, their tails go down, their ears go down. Or if I'm really encouraging and nourishing and saying go go go, and their whole body changes. So they're like my little experiment of just of neurochemistry and just how they pick up what's being communicated.
So I'm often reminded, kids, when infants, toddlers, young children, early childhood, we do a lot of sing-songing naturally to them. We make faces, we make these words, and we talk to them in a different way than we talk to a teenager. Well, sometimes, but it's interesting because they learn from the way we talk to them, and they know from our tone when we're upset with them or it's not going right. And the trust-based, boy, it's all about the words. I said my word is so critical, and that's why I'm really careful, because I'm a writer, trying to choose the right words to identify what it is I'm talking about so it connects to people. And so you can see just the graphics here. You'll get this slide deck too. This is just a great thing that you can share with others, particularly maybe your team, you want to talk more about it. Okay, for some reason, my computer, here we go. So let's take a look at some of the science and how quick some of this happens. Because here's what's going on, the slow and fast. 0.10 seconds judgments are made. 1 second conclusions are made. Ouch. 100 seconds decisions are made. 12 to 18 seconds listening goes inward. 0.07 seconds first impressions are made. 0.07 seconds trust is lost. 0.07 seconds voice is lost. And when you lose trust, it's so hard to regain it. I often think of conversations, particularly positional ones, as if people are doing a tug of war and there's a rope between the two sides. You're on one side, they're on the other side, and you're trying to pull them to your side, and they're trying to pull you to their side. I've learned that when I can catch it and I'm in that conversation with somebody, I just drop the rope. I verbally drop the rope, so there's no tension there, and I let go of it and say, all right, all right, you're right, let's move on. I want to learn more about why you think this and how it makes you tick. It typically makes the other person angry because they got to prove the right, got to prove the right, got to prove the right. But it's a great way to get out of that tension that happens and move on to the next conversation. So change your conversations, change your life. The alchemy of words. Watch this. Cortisol is released when just do as you're told. Oh, you ever had an employer told you that, or boss, or a relative? Just do as you're told. Just do as you're told. What could be so hard about that? I don't understand why you can't get it. Why can't you get this? What's so hard about that? It can't be done. It just can't be done. I don't know about you, but when somebody tells me it can't be done, I want to prove that it can. And it's kind of ironic. Now let's look at the oxytocin. If somebody says to you, you decide how to get there. Here's the goal, you decide. This is so critical for committees, because often committees want to put in place processes and steps, and they want everybody to follow those steps going forward. And then we create repetition, and then it gets old. But instead, here's the goal. You decide how to get there. You continue to amaze me. You continue to amaze me. Let's get excited. Get excited and see where this is going and what we're going to do. So, and this happens in 0.07 seconds. It's all about what we say to somebody. So what did you give your boss to drink? What did you give my boss to drink? Did you give him dopamine and adrenaline? Adrenaline and cortisol. Let's think about this. And what are the effects of it? Just by the conversations we have and how shifting the conversation. 8 words that'll free your life. What will it take to make this happen? There's a conversational shifter, and it's a big dream conversation. What will it take to make this happen? That's what we're really good at telling people why something can't be done. What will it take to make this happen? Conversational cocktails. So here we go. Healthy conversations, unhealthy conversations. So the dopamine also goes in healthy, but it also falls in the unhealthy because we get too much of it from other places. Dee, anything here you want to reiterate or talk about?
I think it might be helpful to just kind of refresh on this idea of that, cortisol is not always bad, testosterone, of course, not always bad, norepinephrine. These neurochemicals can be positive, but again, I think it's this idea of, as Judith has mentioned, and I talked about last time, a reframing or looking at things through a certain lens. This is where the unconscious bias comes in, and I think the thinking faster or slower is so key that sometimes the only variable in any situation is the individual who's interpreting what's happening and the power they have to shift that. So we all have all these chemicals all the time, but it's really just which one is the most powerful and truly how we can shift that chemistry cocktail by making some of these more deliberate, intentional choices.
So I'm going to give you another example of that, and I think it goes in well here. I'm an educator by trade, and so I taught public school for 10 years, and I taught 5-year-olds all day kindergarten, and then I taught dropout high school students in the evening. Ironically, I did the same thing for both age groups. And I never saw anybody who was coming into the room to help a student who we identified had some challenges in a specific area, maybe a learning challenge, as a negative. But it had everything to do with how I framed it for that kid. Now, I have a friend, I'm not going to tell you his name, and ever since he had to go to special ed, or he had this teacher come in and pull him out of the room, the kids made fun of him. And it's become one of those areas in his life that he can always take it back to, oh, this happened in 3rd grade. And I sat down with him and said, you know what, you need to reframe that in your mind. Instead of seeing that as a negative, why don't you see that the school district, the school, the principal, the teacher wanted to make sure you got it, that you got private time, 30 minutes to an hour, one-on-one with this teacher, because they wanted to make sure that you got it. I said, the other kids didn't get this. They were 1 to 30 or 1 to 20. But one-on-one for 30 minutes to an hour, sometimes longer, to make sure that it was connecting with you. That's a totally different way to look at it as a gift, because it helped you become who you are instead of the negative. And it has everything to do with reframing it. The amygdala operates out of distrust. Prefrontal cortex operates out of trust. You want to downregulate and you want to upregulate. So, and since it shows the heartbeat here, Dee, anything you want to put in quickly about heart math?
Yeah, because I don't think we're going to talk about it specifically in this, but Judith Glazer goes into it in her book. I'm actually certified through the Heart Math Institute, and so I'll just briefly give a synopsis of what that research has shown. Heart Math is out in California, actually. They're in, I'm blanking on the name of the city, but they're up in the mountains in California. We were able to go up to their facility and get trained and spend a whole week and really learn all their methods. Their research has shown over about 30 years. And when they first said this, I sort of argued a little bit because I'm all about the brain. But their research has shown that the heart sends more signals via the nervous system up to the brain than the brain sends to the heart. So think about that for a second. If you can imagine, we think that we're sort of really smart, intellectual beings controlling everything, controlling our emotions. But the fact that our bodies are wired to actually get more emotional messages at an unconscious level. We almost don't realize it's happening, but they've been able to study this through all kinds of imaging. And so not only can your brain affect your heart, but your heart very powerfully affects our brain. And I'm not sure if I told a story about the little boy with his dog. Did I tell that in one of these sessions,
No,
Jeff?
but
Do you,
tell
okay,
us.
yeah, let me tell a quick story to kind of help picture this in more of a story format. Roland McCready is one of the founders of Heart Math Institute, and they have lots of resources online, and we can send the link and everything. But Roland had his son many years ago get hooked up to what's called the Heart Math device. It used to be a heart monitor that went around the chest, but now it's a little clip on the ear where they can measure the pulse to kind of correlate with the heart rhythms. And what they look at kind of simplistically is heart rhythm. So is your heart rhythm sort of like that red picture on the left? Your heart's kind of jagged, your heartbeat is very intermittent, it's up, it's down, kind of jagged. Or is your heart on the right side incoherence? It's a very smooth sine wave, essentially, like waves in the ocean. It's just a smooth rhythmic motion. And when we're stressed and anxious, our heart looks like that left graphic, and so does our brain. When we're really stressed, our heart rhythms match our brain rhythms. And similarly, when we're calm and in that state of gratitude and healthy conversation and even just regenerative, restorative wellness, our heart rhythm is also in sync with our brain rhythm, more of an alpha, smooth, coherent rhythm. And so Roland hooked his young son up to the heart monitor and their lovely dog. I guess they're dog lovers too. They're both on heart monitors. And the little boy is told, they're just sitting in the room kind of playing, so both their hearts and their brains are all over the place. And then the boy goes into what is called in the heart math world coherence. So he is trained to close his eyes, slow down his breathing, activate the vagus nerve that we've talked about in prior sessions, which turns on the parasympathetic nervous system, telling the body to chill out. The boy goes into this coherent heart rhythm. They can see it on the monitor. And then what happens, pretty ironically, and here's where it ties into being a leader, the dog, his heart rhythm, not knowing what the boy was doing, the dog's heart rhythms also changed to match the boy's. So this is the idea. It sounds kind of woo-woo, but we are energy systems, and we do affect creatures around us. And you may have those meetings when you worked in an office where you'd walk into a meeting room and you were like, what's going on in here? Somebody's tense, somebody's upset. You almost feel the tension in the air. And this is probably because somebody's very dysregulated, they're stressed, they're not feeling good, and we pick up on that unconsciously. So I think that's the key takeaway from heart math, is that our heart can generate different levels of energy, and we can control it by changing our breathing and changing our intention around it.
Julie, was there a question or anything? No. Okay,
But Julie posted a great link to heart math, so that, and to Judith's book, so that should be really helpful.
great. So the neuroscience of conversations, and it's healthy conversations versus unhealthy. Prefrontal cortex. There we go with that. Heart system, math, heart system. The other thing that's interesting is you all know those people who serve on your committees or work with you that everybody dreads when they walk in the room because they have an impact. Their emotional state has an impact on all of us. And this is also how riots start, because it starts with one person and they end up impacting the other parts of the crowd, and it just boom. So it has everything to do with being able to manage your emotions and think about the words that you're using. Conversational intelligence. So levels of conversation, level setting conversation. Level 1, transactional, informational. 2, positional. 3, transformational. Confirm what we know, defend what we know, discover what we don't know. And the more we can discover what we don't know, the more we can operate in opportunities and possibilities. Versus, no, we can't do that. Versus, that we've tried that before. It doesn't work. And here is some of the tips. Level 1, tell and ask. Level 2, advocate and inquire. Level 3, share and discover. Very different types of conversation. So 3 chemistry lessons really quick about our conversation. We have about 15 minutes here. Be mindful of your conversations and the emotional content you bring. Being mindful of your conversations and the emotional content you bring. Do you know those people, when they talk to you, they exaggerate Everyone's doing it. They all said this. They've all experienced it. And I'm always like, who are they? Who is everyone? Are you sure that's right? Your conversations create either pain, which closes the brain, or pleasure, which opens the brain. Words can hurt. Are you sending friend or foe messages? Are you sending friend or foe messages? Are you sending a message, you can trust me to have your best interest at heart, or I want to persuade you to think about things my way? Think about things my way. Awareness of your meta messages, going back and thinking about the smaller message you have, can lead you to create a safe culture. Thinking about your thinking and exploring like, curiosity and even awe, all of you working together on something that's bigger than each one of you, creates the level 3 conversations. I love the research on gratitude that shows if we would have an attitude of gratitude, we can move to level 3 conversations faster. This allows all parties to interact collaboratively, sharing perspectives, feelings, and aspirations, and elevating insights and wisdom. I tell close friends of mine all the time, you can own your feelings, but realize your feelings will lie to you. It's not always based on facts. And where's the evidence to what you're saying to me? If it's everyone's doing it, where's the evidence of that? Be mindful of your conversations and emotional content you bring. Number 2, conversations trigger emotional reactions. Oh, wow. Conversations carry meaning, so does tone. And meaning is embedded in the listener, even more than in the speaker. It's what Dee was just talking about. Words cause us either to bond and trust more fully, thinking of others as friends and colleagues. Or words cause us to break rapport and think of others as enemies. As you see the connection to your words and your organization's health and success, you open your mind to that health and success. And you begin to create conversational rituals that will lead to stronger, healthier, more successful organizations. At the dinner table, growing up in my household, every night I was asked, what'd you learn today? Tell us something you learned about today. What would you like to learn about tomorrow? And you just got used to asking those questions or answering those questions. And I ask them a lot of people. I will also use the following statements from time to time with you. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being great, 1 being poor, where are you right now? Are you a 1, 5, a 10? Where are you? I let people self-identify where they are. And then I say, if Julie were to say, well, I'm at a level 5, I would say to Julie, what can I do right now to move you from a level 5 to level 6? What can I do to help you? And just that alone causes them to feel better oftentimes, because it's a statement and question that we don't think about much. Conversations trigger emotional reactions. Dee, I'll let you add some color to this.
I think what's helpful to think about from a brain perspective, as you mentioned earlier, Jeff, about the ones we have with ourselves, when we're, again, having that emotional hijack, and just to kind of a little bit more to the lateralization of our brain, the left side of our brain, the left hemisphere, is associated more with things like language and more logical type of interactions. And the right side historically has been more considered the emotional part of the brain. And so when we're more emotionally triggered, that right side might be more active, and also the amygdala as opposed to frontal. But as soon as but words are so powerful. So that's that left language part. So if we're able to even label the words that we're using or change the conversation, I think that's the main point of this takeaway, is that the words we use around it, the language that we're putting into a conversation changes how we're going to respond to it ourselves, but also the people around us. Because once we put words on it, it takes it out of the emotional part a little bit more. So we have more control over it.
So I also grew up in a household of deep faith. I would say it was deep spiritual roots. I wouldn't say religion per se. And it's just interesting growing up and watching how some ministers, some reverends, some pastors, some leaders in faith organizations used fear to try to motivate people, and how that's actually causing more problems than being more invitational and opening up, kind of the arms and saying, think about this, or what about this, or consider this. And it's much easier to step into an invitational offering than it is to one that's fear-based and motivated, because it just scares us. It doesn't stick. So remember, the words we use in our conversations are rarely neutral. Rarely neutral. Words have histories informed by their years of use. Each time a new experience overlays another meaning on a word, the information is collected in our brains and then activated during conversations. Knowing how you project meaning into your conversations will enable you to connect with others. I've always tried to be very authentic and sincere in my presentations. I think that's what I like about Dee as well. Both of us, when we do presentations, are just very transparent. We're kind of informal about it, but we're transparent. When we make a mistake, or we'll tell people, you know, I have challenges with that. And this is something I'm struggling with. I'm going to get this eventually, but we're just transparent with other people try to be right or tell people how to get there to be right. Remember, the words you use in our conversations are rarely neutral. So be mindful of your conversations, emotional content, conversations that trigger emotional responses. The words we use in our conversations are rarely neutral. So here you go. Here's some tips for strategic conversations. Listen to connect, not to reject. Listen to connect, not to reject. We've all been in those conversations. Maybe it's with your spouse and talk about something, oh, they're wrong. Then you write something down because you're waiting for your turn. Because all you want to do is defend what you've done. We're not listening to connect. We're listening to reject. How do you know if someone's really listening to you? Type in real quickly, how do you know someone's really listening to you? What are some of the ways you know if someone's listening to you? Would you type in some responses here? How do you know if someone's listening to you? So my ex, in the latter years of my ex life, had challenges actually looking at people when talking to them, and would walk away and talk to you. You could hear what my ex was saying. Like, what's going on? Hello, I'm over here. Talk to me. Don't talk to something that is out there and expect me to be able to respond. So that was one way I knew listening wasn't occurring. Billy, what do we have coming in?
Got some great comments. We have eye contact, body language, eye contact, and they relay back. I heard you say eye contact, nodding their head, commenting, asking questions. They're looking at you, facial expressions, and they may ask a question.
And I would say that all of us have gotten really good at camouflaging our true reactions and listening to somebody, shaking our head and putting a smile on our face, and maybe even looking up at them from time to time, and our mind is somewhere else. We're physically present, but we're mentally gone. I like to say we know if somebody's really listening to us is they can repeat to us in their own words the impact of what we're saying or what we said, not verbally what we said, verbatim, but in their own words, and then also take it to what they might do with it. Listen non-judgmentally. That's tough because we judge so quickly. Listening to connect is felt as positive and stimulates more oxytocin, which is the bonding hormone. Tips for strategic contact: listen to connect, not reject. Number 2, ask questions for which you have no answers. The more curious you can be in these conversations, the better off you are. Too often we ask leading questions where we want them to go. Causes defensiveness, feeling of manipulation, putting others on guard. And finally, prime for trust. Build a rapport with others. Make time for others to get to know each other as people first. Give them the opportunity to fill each other out, not physically, but mentally, who they are. We're hardwired to connect with other humans. And boy, we're seeing that now more than ever with social isolation. And so have a connection with people first before you ever start decision-making on a committee. Get to know them as people first. I had a boss that just was brilliant with this. It was always people first, stuff second. People first, business second. And he put people up there always first. And I, sometimes to default, to the negative side, not default, but fault, because it would give them so much grace and latitude. And my impacting everybody where I would be quick to get rid of somebody. They're like, no, we've just had them in the wrong position. We haven't connected with them yet. So the conversation is radically different when you allow for relationship building first. And it's radically different when you allow for space for people to evolve to be a better them tomorrow. And that's why we base so much on the past. Relationship building first, and the space or the grace to evolve and grow. Prime for trust, reinforce success. We don't do this one either. Focus on seeing and validating what success looks like for both sides. Talk about what success is. It's a question I always ask when I'm working with clients. Well, how would you define success of this project? How would you define success of this webinar? Then you eliminate uncertainty and move people into action through greater connectivity and coherence. There's that word coherence. So Dee, what would you want to add here?
I think, just to key into that word uncertainty, when we, Judith mentions this in the book, I may have mentioned it in prior sessions, the Neuro Leadership Institute, Dr. David Rock, has a model called SCARF, and each word is one of the threats that we feel that put us in that reactive state. So one is status, the C is for certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. Whenever any of those feel like they're not working to our favor or they feel threatened, especially uncertainty, we move into more of that threat state, and we're not going to have good conversations. We're not going to have good work cultures. And so the more that you can eliminate that uncertainty, build that trust, you change not only brains of individuals, but to the very opening slide, that you actually change the relationships and you change the culture of an organization. Really powerful.
Yes. So what's your takeaway from today? The 3 types of conversations and how to build trust and rapport using words and the 3 levels. What's your takeaway? And perhaps if you've attended more than one of these webinars, maybe there's even how would you connect this to something else you've learned or something you've learned in your day-to-day life, how this is overlapping. What's a takeaway from today or even out of the 4 webinars, something that's really resonated with you? Give me a couple of seconds to think about that. And we got 3 minutes here.
So Jeff, I think one of the challenges, and I think you and Dee kind of talked about it, since we're in this human starved connection life that we're in, what do you have any 1 or 2 tips of how you can build these strong relationships that have listening and where you ask questions and you prime for trust and you build success in a Zoom telephone world where you can't sometimes see the body language or feel that connection?
Yeah. Dee, do you want to tackle this first and I'll add mine?
Yeah, and gosh, so many, and maybe we can send a longer list, but just for the time's sake, I would say one could be starting out a conversation, maybe with just like a moment of recalibration, maybe collectively, whether it's just calling a family member or you have a meeting of, I don't know, 50 people, just taking, it can be called a mindful minute, a mindful 10 seconds, and just collectively saying, let's all just take a moment to maybe close our eyes if that's comfortable. Okay, take a couple of slow, deep breaths together, inhaling for 4 seconds, exhaling for 5 seconds. That's what shifts into more of a relaxed state, that parasympathetic nervous system. I think that kind of sets a foundation and sets a tone where people feel like they're literally on the same page or in the same wavelength, that I see be really powerful to kick off a conversation in a more connected, collaborative way.
I would say always start with some kind of what would seem trivial, open-ended type questions like, what's your favorite Halloween costume? Because there's no threat there to that one. And of course, I did the opposite. I showed you one that was not my favorite. And that gives the humanness element, particularly in Zoom meetings. Yes, you can read what other people are saying or you can talk about it. The more people you have on a Zoom meeting, the less you want to do with actual giving people time to verbally chat, because it takes away from everything. Where if they will put it in a text chat, you can read and scan them quickly and you find some commonalities there. We're all human. That helps a whole lot. And then I think, the less you can do information dumps or brain dumps on people and have them read that, put that in documents that they read before they arrive, the better off those meetings are, and the better off those webinars are, or those Zoom presentations, because they can actually discuss where there's challenges or where you want to go or how you might define success. So those are a few. Julie, what are some of the things that have come in?
We've just got one comment. So if anybody else wants to type in, or if you don't, you can use your free pass. Oh, getting a couple in there. Defer to your higher prefrontal cortex thinking to better regulate yourself, but also better connect with others. In circumstances when you're dealing with folks that are not motivated to communicate at level 3, what are the things you can do or say to get them there or to meet in the middle? If only humans were as empathetic as the pups. And the last one was prime for trust. People first is good, and the people, good for the people and good for business. So there is a question in there about how if you want to do it level 3 and someone's not right there, what can you do?
So the easiest question is, where do you want to be 2 years from now? What do you want to be doing? The easiest question. Where do we see the organization a year from now? Where would we like it to be? And that changes the whole thought process. The other thing I will do with people, and I would do it myself, I will say to them, you know, I find myself obsessing. I'm harder on myself than anybody else ever will be. And I find myself obsessing over the words I've used, the things I've done to a default. And I have a lot of energy around it, a lot of passion. And so I will say to some people sometimes, wow, we're returning back to that issue. You've got a lot of energy about this issue, a lot of passion on this issue. What's underneath that? What's driving that? That's a different question. That's a hard question to answer. Why am I so focused on it? What's driving that? Do you know? And oftentimes they can't answer that. It puts them step back. I said, remove yourself and think about your thinking. Why is there so much passion on this? And that's a way.
Yeah, and then
Go ahead.
sorry. Oh, just to add to that for that question too, I in the Staying in Leadership Academy that I'm just graduating from, a year-long leadership school here in Dallas, something they've taught us is this idea of one way to sort of lower that threat response is to say to someone, hey, in this example of, you know, the story I'm telling myself is that I've upset you in some way, you know, is that correct? You know, kind of showing them that we're all telling ourselves stories all the time. And so that you may feel like they aren't ready or motivated, but maybe we're just not seeing something that they're currently seeing. And I'll just tie into Julie's last question too. And Jeff and I are working on content for really working from home and remote working that, you know, that we can bring to the front later. But I think one thing that I've seen happen from a positive side is the whole remote working, it feels disconnected, but in some ways it almost brings us closer in some ways, I find. Like Julie seeing your kitchen in the background, and earlier you mentioned your 15-year-old saying, what's for dinner? I can almost picture you two having dinner in there, you know? So in some ways, people seeing our home, hearing the dogs in the background, hearing our kids in the background. So I've seen people's bedrooms that I wouldn't have seen before. In some ways, it can actually bring us closer if we sort of, again, look through that lens.
Yeah. So I would cap the whole thing about emotional intelligence is people first, and learning to regulate your emotions and the emotions of others, and guide them to level 3 conversations about dreaming big picture sky. Where would, if money wasn't an issue, where would we want to be? What would we want to be doing personally, professionally, and as an organization? And then having those conversations, then saying, what would it take to make that happen? Why aren't we focused on that? What would it take to make that happen? And you suddenly look and go, well, why am I doing all this other stuff? So we're over time. Thanks so much, everybody. Appreciate it very much. It's been great for Wellness Wednesdays. And we'll send some information to Julie she can send out. And have a great remainder to your week. Julie, final words?
Great. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And we'll be posting these this live as well. And Jeff will send me his slide deck. But I want to thank everybody for participating. And we will hopefully see you soon at one of our other events. And have a great day. If you have any other questions that come up, just email me and I would be happy to send them off to Jeff and Dee for feedback.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great day.
Thank you.